Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan classes Funda Clear. So today I'll explain the fourth chapter of the Class-10th economy, and the chapter that we have here is Globalization and the Indian economy. So globalization and the Indian economy. Now you know what, that as consumers we have a lot of choice for goods and service today. Now latest models of televisions, phones or mobiles can be bought in our country. Gone are the days when they were only ambassadors in Fiat on the Indian roads. Every season we have the new models of automobiles coming and people are buying them too. You know what, that we can even buy a product that is manufactured in USA, manufactured in China, and we haven't even seen the factories where it is being produced, but still we are buying them sitting in our country. You know what, that in a matter of years our markets of our country have been transformed, and in this chapter we will talk about this rapid transformation. Like, what is this rapid transformation? How does it change the lives of the people? And you know what, that there can be explosion of brands in every, you could say, field of our brands. Like you could say in items from shells to televisions to processed juice fruits, we have the explosion of brands. Like we can buy, we have a lot of choice of brands from other countries, from our countries as well. And we'll talk about what are the factors for the rapid transformation, this kind of transformation as well. So in this chapter we'll talk about globalization and what impact does it have on the Indian economy. So all this we are going to discuss in this chapter. So without any further ado, let's get started with the first topic, that is production across countries. So production across countries. Now till 20th century, what would happen was that production was limited within the country. Production was organized within the country. What traveled from one country to another was raw materials, mechanisms and the finished products. Colonies such as India exported cotton and raw materials and then imported the finished products, as we've already talked about it in history chapters. Now you know what, that was done until few years back, until few decades back. What happened is that MNCs have come up. MNCs, that is multinational corporations. Now that they have come up, MNC is a kind of factory or production unit, you could say, that has a control over production in more than one nation. So you could say that its factories has been set up in more than one nation or countries. That is MNC, and as MNCs have come up, production is not limited just within a country. Like for example, you know what, we should talk about MNC. Now MNC that is doing research in USA, like it is conducting its design of the products in research centers of USA. Then after that, the components of those products are being made in China, and after those have been made, those products have been made, they are shipped to Europe and Mexico. Now as they are shipped in those countries, you know what, that in India we have some units as well for the customer care. Like there is a factory, you could say, unit where there is a service of customer care for that country. So you could say for that factory, for that MNC. So if there is any fault in any of the products, that customer care would provide some technicians and those kind of things. Now according to this example, why that MNC has chosen particularly these countries, there must be some reasons behind it as well. You know what, that in USA there are good research centers and good designs can be made in US, and in China provides a very cheap labor and is skilled as well. That is why many MNCs have set up in China so that their products would be made at a very low cost. And India, you know what, that Mexico is connected to US markets, and Europe, North and East Europe is connected to European markets, and that is why those products have to be assembled and shipped to those countries as well, to those continents as well, so that they would be sold into the international markets. And you know what, that in India we have good English speaking technicians as well, engineers as well, and there is a lot of youth who can speak English as well. So that provides, you could say, that cuts off the cost 50 to 60% of that MNC. Now that you could say that there would be cheap cost of production to 50 to 60%. So you could say that this kind of MNC, the structure of MNC is very complex. Like the production in MNCs is in a very complex way. It's not just in one country. It would be 2 countries, 3 countries, 4 countries, or many more countries, so that it would, you could say, spread out so much and would have a name in the world as well. After that, we should talk about interlinking production across countries. So interlinking production across countries. Now we have seen that those MNCs need those kind of land. You could say that, that those MNCs see for their profit. If they are investing in any of the countries, if they are selling up their factories and companies in any country, then what it would see is that its own profit. That is why land, facilities, availability of cheap and skilled and unskilled labor as well is very important factor for the MNCs, and other factors as well, like the equipments needed for that factory, for that MNC. And besides that, MNC will choose a country that is providing facility, you could say policies, some government policies in their favor as well. We should talk about it later in this chapter. So you could say that MNCs choose a place that is beneficial for itself. Like for example, it would provide the lands, water, and other facilities, equipments, cheap, you could say cheap labor that is skilled or unskilled as well. You could say that for many of the MNCs, there is a need of unskilled labor as well. It's not like that every labor has to be educated, civilized, those kind of things. And that any kind of the money that is used for buying assets such as land, equipments, machines, those kind of things is known as investment. And as you know that the trade between 2 countries is foreign trade. So we have foreign investment and foreign trade. Now at times what happens that when MNC is set up in a country, they might form a partnership with local companies. They might do work jointly with those local companies, and the benefit is twofold. First of all, those MNCs could provide some money for machines and that for faster production machines and those equipments, and secondly, it would provide technology mechanism to those local companies for faster production. But what happens that the main factor behind, you could say that behind joining partnership with those local companies is to buy them, so that it would earn its own profit. Now what happens that MNCs have a large amount of money, that they are quite rich. Many of the MNCs are even rich, you could say even have more capital compared to the budgets of the developing countries. So you could say that it's a very easy task for them to buy the local companies, and as they buy the local companies, their assets would be bought as well. Like for example, when we have example of Cargill Foods. Now Cargill Foods is an American food company which has bought the local companies like Parag Food Companies of our country. Now Parag Food Company was very rich, you could say, in our country, had many links in this country, and that it even had 4 oil refineries which now have been in the name of, you could say, Cargill Foods Companies. And you could say that because of this, Cargill Food Company is the largest producer of oil in the world. You could say that not in the world, in the country, you could say, on an average of producing 5 billion patches per day. So you could say that that's a very big amount, you could say quite a big amount. And that MNCs do the foreign investment in hope of getting profit from those assets. And another aspect of MNCs joining with local companies is also there. Now that many MNCs, what they do is that they ask for production from small producers or small companies for production of footwear, shells, or sport items, those kind of things. And after that they are produced by the small producers, those MNCs would just take the price tags, their own brand names. So they would sell those products in the name of their own own company brands, and in this way they would earn a very good profit, because those small producers would have a cheap cost of production, and as they sell to the MNC, what would happen that those MNCs would have a very big price. Like MNCs have the control over the prices as well. As just what I've said, that they were quite rich, they have so much influence and power, so that is why they can control their prices as well. So getting to know that, you could say that dispersely widely in this location, these are interlinked. The trade is interlinked, the production is interlinked. You could be fooled as well. You are buying from a very big company, sure, you are buying is from a very big country, but who knows, it would be made from your neighbor or maybe some small producer. So you could say that is why MNCs try to do everything for their favor, for the profit as well. After that, we have the next topic, that is foreign trade and integration of markets. Foreign trade and integration of markets. Now we have talked that there are many MNCs starting up in different countries, and there is a lot of foreign trade compared to decades back. And you know what could be the basic function of foreign trade? It's not like just changing and you could say just supplying those goods, raw materials over the countries, but what could be the basic function, the basic function of foreign trade? Now there could be two aspects. First is that those producers would have a chance to reach beyond their domestic markets. That is, they could go to compete in the international markets, they could go to other countries to sell their product, to show that what they have made, and you could say that there's also profit for them. Like if they go to another country for international market competition and those kind of things, their products would be spread all over. You could say that their name, there would be fame, popularity as well. So they would have a chance, opportunity to reach beyond the domestic markets, and same happens to the consumers as well. Now what happens that for consumers there would be a lot of choice, you could say, among different products. Now what would happen that if there is more competition over products between the companies, then there will be cheap prices of products as well. Like if they want to sell their something and they have a lot of competition, then it's obvious that they would sell their products at a very cheap price. So you could say that consumers are also having the opportunity to reach beyond their domestic market, to reach beyond the domestic produce. Now they can go out, they have an opportunity of different brands, different items, so that they could buy at whatever rate they want and whatever thing they want from whichever brand they want. So you could say that foreign trade provides an opportunity for marketers, consumers, as well as producers, you could say. Now we have seen that foreign trade has a kind of lot of impact as well. Now you know what, that as the competition gets higher, the prices gets lower as well. Like for example, we have an example of Chinese toys in India. Like that is an example of foreign trade in our country. Now you know what, that Chinese toys are very of good quality and at cheap prices, and they are exported to India. Now as they are exported to India, those companies, though you could say many markets, many toy shops have replaced the Indian toys with Chinese toys, because they are at cheap price and good. There is a variety of Chinese toys as well. Now because of that, those Indian toys producers are now you could say suffering from competition, suffering from losses. A lot of loss can be seen within them. Now what happens that Chinese toys make their toys for themselves, and there is surplus production. What they would do is that they will see that there is population in India too. There can be times too, there are children so much in our country, so there will be a very big demand of toys as well, and that is why they have exported toys in our country at a cheap price. There is a variety of Chinese toys and they are sold very well in our country. It might be like even in your house there might be some toys or some kind of, you could say that some accessory made in China. So you could say that is why there is a lot of impact of foreign trade as well. You might not know the thing you are using is not manufactured in India, but it could be from some foreign as well, foreign countries as well. Now we could say that is what foreign trade is. What is the basic function of foreign trade? After that we have the next topic, that is what is globalization. So what is globalization? Now you know what, that as there is greater foreign trade, there will be greater foreign investment, then there will be greater integration of markets as well. Now as we saw that there is a kind of foreign trade, and due to foreign trade there would be integration of markets as well, because they would have an opportunity to reach beyond the domestic markets, and a lot of you could say linking would be there, so there will be integration of markets as well. And as there is more foreign investment, more for greater you could say foreign trade, then there will be greater integration of markets as well. And you could say that this kind of thing, this kind of greater integration of markets is what we call globalization. Now you could say that greater integration, greater transformation with greater investment is known as globalization. Globalization has an impact all over the world as well, and every country seems to have globalization in their country. They can't just escape from it, because materials come and go from their country over their countries. Now what happens then, that you could say globalization is with more and more goods and services, technology, mechanism cannot travel from one country to another country. So you could say that this is what is called globalization. And with globalization, many countries are in contact with each other that didn't used to happen many years back, many decades back. And you know what, that other than the movement of goods and services, there is a movement of people as well. That is also a part of globalization. Globalization doesn't mean only the you could say goods and services and technology. There could be culture, cuisine, tradition as well, moving from one country to another country. So movement of people is also there. That is due to in search of better income, better job, better education, better facilities. But now there is not, you could say that in recent years there is not much increase in movement of people due to various restrictions in country over countries. So you could say that is what globalization is. Globalization is a very complex process. Like you know what, that many, if we talk advanced information, what is happening is that many countries are saying that the globalization is not good for them. Like their you could say their people are now suffering, their company, you could say their own factory owners, industry owners, small producers are now facing competition, suffering from loss due to globalization. So we will also talk about it in the later section of this chapter. After that we have the next topic, that is factors that have enabled globalization. So factors that have enabled globalization. Now we have seen that there is a lot of globalization all over the world, but what could be the factors behind it? So now let's get to know about them with the subtopic, that is technology. So technology, now you could say that technology is one of the major factors that enables the globalization process. Now you could say that from the last 50 years or 5 decades, there have been so much improvements, several improvements in the fields of technology. Like for example, we have transport, like we have a great improvement in transport as well. There was a time when you had to travel on animals, and now you're traveling by air. You could say you're traveling in airplanes. So you could say that is because of improvement in technology, and because of you could say because of improvements in transportation, what has happened that now goods and services can be traveled over long distance at a low time and at cheap cost as well. So you could say that in low time at cheap cost, those goods and services now can be traveled over long distances because of technology. And even in technology, we have communication and information technology that has improved a lot in globalization, as over time it has been improved. Now you know what, that communication technology, like you have telecommunication technology, telegraphs, telephones, phones, fax, those services help us to contact one another around the world and in the remote areas of the world as well, because they have the signal through the you could say server, you could say through satellites. You could say the server that is in satellite, so they have connection in the satellites. So you could say that as information technology, we have a lot of things come. You could say that through information technology, even your Google, YouTube, they are also a part of information technology. Now today, in today's era, all of you might fascinates the world of internet, and you could say that all the information technology, computers, phones, those kind of things. Even if you're watching this video, it is also because of internet. That is a part of information technology. Now internet, you could say information technology helps us to send instant electronic mail, or what we call email, and talks that are voicemail all over the world, and at a reasonable cost as well. So you could say that technology has contributed a lot in the globalization in our lives as well. Like if we talk about it, then it would be a big chapter itself as well. So we should talk about only in the field of you could say that globalization. And you know what, that computers now are being used in almost every field of activities. So you could say that is the importance of technology all over the world. After that, we have the next factor, that is liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. So liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. Now we saw the example of Chinese toys in India, but suppose the government of India imposes a tax in the import on the import of all those Chinese toys. Now all the buyers from India would have to pay a tax. That would be also a very high price. Now automatically the import of those toys, of Chinese toys, would decrease in our country, and Indian toy makers will prosper. Now you could say that in foreign investment, in foreign trade, tax acts as a barrier, as a restriction. Now you could say that tax is used to regulate the foreign trade and foreign investment in a country. You could say that the government of India can regulate, can increase or decrease as per the time the foreign trade and foreign investment in our country by using tax as a barrier. So you could say that if governments wants, then it can regulate those foreign trade investments as well. And after independence, after 50 years, what happened was that there was always kind of barriers of tax, so that Indian production will continue. Indian production, you know what, that after independence, India was still a new country, developing country, and even now it is developing country. But you know what, that when a country is new, it doesn't have to face a competition, otherwise it would go down, it would fall down. That is why in the starting days of after the independence, what happened was that came you could say that tax was imposed. There was no foreign trade or foreign investment in our country. Only the essential items were imported that were needed, otherwise our country would fall on as well, like petroleum and those kind of very essential machines and fertilizers, those kind of things that were essentially needed in our country. And after that, after 1990 and around 1990 and 1991, what happened was that the government now thought that there is a there could be a very good competition if those foreign agencies, foreign trade and foreign investment comes to our country. And you know what, that it was only after 1990 and 1991 that government, or you could say that government removed all the barriers on the foreign trade and foreign investment, because now till then what happened that all those Indian producers were now in a good condition, so now they could face competition with international, or you could say foreign trade and foreign investment as well. And that is why all the barriers were removed. And this you could say this kind of decision made by the government of India was supported by big international agencies as well, big international organizations. So you could say that if governments want, it can regulate as well foreign trade and investment. And you know what, that removing the barriers over the foreign trade and foreign investment is what we call liberalization. And liberalization in trade is very, very important for more development, you could say, for MNCs setting up in a country for the profit of MNCs. So there should be some there should be some liberalization over the trade as well. Now after that, we have the next topic, that is World Trade Organization or WTO. Now, World Trade Organization or WTO. Now, when we talked about liberalization of foreign investment and foreign policy, what we saw that the decision was supported by big international organizations. Now, they support that there should be some liberalization in trade as well, and one such organization is WTO. Now, WTO that stands for World Trade Organization, that whose aim is to make, you could say, make rules for the liberalization of trade, you could say foreign trade and investment policies, and to see if they are obeyed or not. Now, there are 164 countries that are the members of WTO. Now, all those big international trade organizations, what they say is that you could say that not having liberalization over the foreign trade and you could say foreign investment is harmful, is not good. That is why all those countries which are the member of WTO have to follow all the trade rules. But what we say is that in present, you could say that in practice, there are many developed countries. You know that developing countries do follow the rules of WTO, but those developed countries aren't. Like, for example, we have USA that is a supranational, you could say superpower of the world, and that is why it is dominant over WTO. Now, we have some example in agricultural sector as well. As we saw in the chapter 2 of this book, that agriculture is a backbone of our economy. Like, over 15% of our population, around 60% of the population is employed in agriculture, and it contributes a very large part of our economy as well. Whereas in USA, it is only 1%. The agriculture sector contributes only 1% in the economy of USA and tiny 0.5% in the employment. Still, the government of USA supplies very vast sums of money, large sums of money to the farmers, and that is why those farmers are able to sell their produce at a very cheap prices. And you know what, that they are even exporting to India as well, in many other developing countries, and those developed countries, the farmers of those developing countries are having a lot of you could say competition with those farmers from USA, because those farmers from USA have already received vast sum of money from the government of USA, and that is why they could sell their produce at a cheap price as well. You know what, that according to the rules of WTO, all the developing countries have stopped giving so much money to the farmers, you could say that, which has surplus amount of goods and those kind of things, but still USA is doing so. So is it really a fair WTO? Like, it is supporting USA, isn't it? So you could say that in practice, there are many developed countries which are dominant over WTO. Practically, specifically, we have the USA. And you know what, that when we talk about WTO, it's strict as well. Like, every country has to follow its rules, hasn't it? After that, we have the next topic, that is impact of globalization in India. So, impact of globalization in India. Now, if we talk about, now we have already talked about globalization, foreign investment, foreign trade. But what about India? What is the impact of globalization in India? Now, you know what, that over 20 to 30 years, there has been a lot of globalization in India. Before that, there wasn't that much. Like, even if there was a very, very little much. But now you could say that there has been a lot of globalization in India as well. Many MNCs are setting up as well over 20 to 30 years. And what is the you could say that what is the effect of those globalization on the people? We should talk about it as well. Now, you know what, that you could say that there's a lot of competition whenever there's a globalization, whenever the MNCs are setting up, and due to that you could say that competition, all those people who are well-off people of urban areas are profiting, are getting profit from it, are benefiting. You could say that due to competition, the prices are lower, but the standards are still high. So you could say that now they can buy those items and their standards of living are rising, and we have some evidence as well. Now firstly, MNCs are coming in India, are setting up in India. Generally they're interested in soft drinks, fast foods, you could say in these sectors, in banking of urban areas, in electronics. They are generally interested, and after that they have also created some new opportunities of job in these sectors, and all those companies, small producers which are supplying the raw materials to those MNCs are also benefiting from them. Secondly, many of the Indian companies have also benefited due to competition, as they are risking, you could say that they are contributing, they are taking the, you could say that they are staking their money, betting their money on the new technologies, new mechanisms, and are gaining profit from it. And because of the competition, some Indian companies themselves have become the MNCs, you could say they have the operation worldwide. Like for example, Tata Motors, that is the company of automobiles. We have Infosys, it is a company of, you could say, electronics. We have IT generally. After that we have Ranbaxyans, that is a company of medicines. Asian Paints, that is a company of paint. So we have many Indian companies which now have become the MNCs. Now they have the operations worldwide. And besides that, what we have here is that you could say that we have these MNCs have also created opportunities not just in these sectors but also in technology, particularly in IT sectors. For example, in India, many newspapers are being printed in Delhi for the London. Like they were, you could say that data is imported. Like data is sent to Delhi magazine, you could say Delhi newspaper or magazine printers through internet, and after that even there is e-banking. Even the money is not into hand to hand, it's e-banking. So you could say that this could be some example. And we have call centers for those MNCs that are in different countries in India, so that is also part of ID. So you could say that that is the impact of globalization in India. But what about those workers, those you could say poor people who are not well off in urban areas? Let's talk about them as well with the next topic, that is competition and uncertain employment. Competition and uncertain employment. Now due to so much competition, many small producers have shut down of India in capacitors, tires, paints, toys, and many other items like electronics, foods. Many of the Indian you could say that Indian markets have shut down. Many of the Indian shops have shut down because of so much competition. They are facing so much loss due to it, and there is uncertainty in employment as well. Like for example, what happens then if there is a, you could say if there is an MNC in America or in Mexico? Now what happens is that they would ask, they would order an Indian exporter, an Indian garment exporter to export a very large amount of garments. Now that exporter would now have to, you could say, decrease the cheaper, you could say, cost of production. He would want the production would at a very cheap cost. Now he can't just decrease the you could say price of raw material, and that is why he cuts off the wages of laborers or workers. Now what happens that he would not, you could say that hire the workers for a whole year, but would hire them at a temporary basis and would pay them flexibly. Now that is called flexibility in factories. That is a very bad thing for the workers. Now just think about that, like they have to work and they have night shift as well, overworking hours as well. They have to overwork and still they would get paid just for some days they are working. They would not be paid. Now you could say that that is a kind of cunning trap for them. They have to do work, otherwise they won't survive. And even if they do the work, they still can't survive with dignity and with all the essential needs that are needed for their survival. So you could say that there is uncertainty in employment and competition of employment. All those workers who used to enjoy some of their rights now are not enjoying because of so much competition, because of those so many things, because of MNCs as well. There's a role of MNC in doing so as well. After that, you could say that even in the organized sector, now adopting the ways of unorganized sector, even in organized sector, rules are not being followed by the people, by the employers, and all the wages, you could say workers and all those laborers are being exploited and deprived of their rights that must be given to them, must be provided them with. After that, we have the next topic, that is The struggle for a fair globalization. So a struggle for a fair globalization. Now first of all, what do you even mean by the word fair globalization? Now fair globalization simply means that there will be opportunities, more and more opportunities in globalization, and it would be shared equally as well. It's not like all the profits would be provided to rich people, educated people who get the profit from those globalization, but it should be provided to poor people and those people who are not educated, who can't get the benefit from globalization. And that is why, you know what, in doing so, government can take some initiatives as well, like we have already discussed many of them in the previous chapters. First of all, there should be some labor rights. Rights should be provided to all the laborers and workers so that they would not be exploited, they would not have to do overwork or night shifts. After that, what government can do, that it can negotiate with WTO to have some, you could say that, barriers for the foreign investment and foreign policy. Like it can impose some kind of tax. It's not like complete barrier, but yeah, some barrier can be there, can it be? After that, it can provide some backbone, you could say, provide some help, you could say subsidies to all those farmers and poor workers, laborers. And it can collide, it can do collaboration. Our government can do collaboration with many of the developing countries who are fighting against WTO, against the dominance of many of the developed countries. As all of you know that there is a dominance of developed countries in WTO. So all of those countries which have problem with that can collaborate with each other and can fight against it. We have some, you could say that there is always some struggle for globalization, for fair globalization. Like in Hong Kong there were some, and in every part of the world there is, like even in India there is import, there would be some questions or you could say anything about it. So you could say that there should be a fair globalization as well, provided to all people, not just rich people, to poor people as well, and it has to be provided by the government as well. After that, we have the next and last topic, that is summing up. Now summing up, what have we concluded? Now we saw in this chapter that production is across the country. Earlier it used to be within the country, but now it's across the country in a very complex ways, because all the demands they see for cheap labor, cheap places, cheap cost of production. That is why, or you could say that these kind of production are organized in a very complex ways. Even in demands, we have talked about foreign investment, foreign trade, and we have seen that the greater integration of and interconnecting of countries is what we call globalization. Globalization can be a people, tradition, culture as well. That is not a part of this chapter. And after that, we talked about that more benefit, all those rich people, educated people are benefited from the globalization process, but not the rich and lower people of our country. And MNCs play a very major role in the globalization process as well, and there has to be struggle for globalization as well. We talked about the uncertain employment and those kind of things in this chapter. So that is all we have covered in this chapter. I've covered all the topics and subtopics, and the last remaining chapter of this book will be covered in further upcoming video. So stay tuned for upcoming videos. Thank you very much.